Hello viewers, welcome to Amateur Hour. I'm your host, Ben, the Amateur Exegete. It's Saturday, August 7th, and on today's episode, you'll be watching my interview of Jackson Wheat on the overarching problems he sees in creationism, especially young Earth creationism. Wheat, who has a substantial social media presence in the form of a prolific YouTube channel, recently completed his undergraduate degree in organismal biology and is currently in grad school, continuing his work in the field of biology. He's also participated in various debates on YouTube, sparring with some of the best, and the worst, the creationist camp has to offer. I've been on Wheat's channel before, and I always walk away from our chats with a ton of information to digest on the subject of evolutionary biology. My hope is that viewers get something out of today's conversation as well. Before we get to my conversation with Wheat, let me first tell you what's been going on in the world of the Amateur Exegete, and also briefly discuss two articles that appeared last year in the Journal of Biblical Literature and Novum Testamentum. So, what's been going on in my world? First, if you haven't seen it already, my interview of Cameron Mazurek on the subject of the Christadelphian perspective of Jesus came out a few weeks ago. Mazurek is not a Trinitarian, and he believes that Jesus was only a human being. This view stands in complete contrast with the majority of Christians who think that not only was Jesus a divine being, but that he is the second person of the Trinity. Mazurek, in our conversation, explains why he thinks the Trinitarian view is wrong. On the 1st of August, I published a review of Kristen Swenson's short volume, A Most Peculiar Book, The Inherent Strangeness of the Bible. As I make clear in the review, while this is a book from which any reader will profit, it is well suited for those who have only just begun to dip their toes in the ocean of biblical criticism. But if you don't value my endorsement, then you should know that scholars like Bart Ehrman and Pete Enns recommend Swenson's book as well. Finally, I've completed a few posts in the Invasion of the Bible Snatchers series that will be published on the blog in September. These posts will close out my discussion of Ray Comfort's book, and, at least for a little while, my work on the Invasion series generally. I do hope to revisit it someday, but I think I'll be turning my focus back onto the Gospel of Mark for a while. If you've watched my interview of Cameron Mazurek or read my review of A Most Peculiar Book, please let me know in the comments, and if you haven't done either but would like to, links are available in the video description. In addition to the work that I've been doing on the blog and on my YouTube channel, I've also been doing a ton of reading. Here's a brief overview of two pieces I've been reading. Junia, An Apostle Before Paul, by Yi Zhanlin. This piece appeared last year in the Journal of Biblical Literature. Lin is an associate professor of New Testament at Yale Divinity School and is the author of The Erotic Life of Manuscripts that came out in 2016. I haven't read that one yet, but it's on my radar now. This piece covers the subject of Junia, a character that shows up in Paul's letter to the Romans, who is described by Paul in chapter 16, verse 7 as one who was prominent among the apostles and was in Christ before he was. Many scholars, including Lin, think that Junia was indeed considered an apostle, and that she held a special place of prominence alongside her husband, Andronicus, also mentioned in the text. But there have been a number of detractors, including Al Wolters, David Hutter, and Michael Burer. These scholars contend either that Junia is really Junius, a man, or that Junia wasn't actually an apostle. Lynn responds to their arguments, and then builds her own case for Junia's apostleship. Standard classical Greek constructions in the Gospel according to Mark and their importance for interpretation, by James W. Volz. You have heard it said that the Greek of the Gospel of Mark is simplistic, but Volz says unto you that things aren't always as they appear. In this piece from Novum Testamentum, Volz argues that Mark's Greek is often similar to what you might find in classical Greek texts. To that end, he puts forward a number of examples where Markan terms or phrases are paralleled in classical Greek writers like Herodotus, Plato, and others. One thing that stood out to me is Volz's observation that Mark's Greek begins to change as the Gospel progresses, specifically after about the first half. He doesn't address why that is the case, but he does tell us to see his commentary on Mark. I guess I need to track that one down too. One more thing, Volz is clear from the outset that he isn't dealing with the Greek of an edition of Mark, like that found in the Nestle Aland text. Instead, he is talking about the Greek in Codex Vaticanus and its allies, which he considers to be fine representations of the Markan text. I could go on and on, not only about these two pieces, but also about the various other articles, books, and blog posts I've been reading as of late. Unfortunately, time does not permit it. I would like to hear about what you've been reading, so if you get a chance, please let me know in the comments or shoot me an email at amateurexegete@gmail.com. Many of you know that I grew up in a King James-only, dispensational, young earth creationist church. When I was a teenager, my dad and I went to a seminar put on by John Morris of the Institute for Creation Research, and I purchased a bunch of books there too. And when I went to college at Pensacola Christian College, the stated position of the school was that of young earth creationism. In fact, I had a biology and astronomy professor, both, who taught from that model. But in my 20s, I moved away from young earth creationism, in part because the evidence for evolution was overwhelming, but also because the evidence for young earth creationism was sorely lacking. But biology is not my wheelhouse. It's not my forte. So I asked Jackson Wheat to come on to talk about what he sees are the overarching problems with young earth creationism. Wheat, as I mentioned in the introduction, is a grad student working in the field of biology. He also has a prolific YouTube channel in which he discusses evolutionary biology, genetics, fossils, all sorts of topics. And he's also a published author, recently coming out with a book called The Rocks Were There. He wrote this book with R.J. Downard, and it's a very informative, very interesting read, a phenomenal index, just a great book to have on your shelf. So, without further ado, here is my interview of Jackson Wheat.
So creationism has a very bad history of historical revisionism. And I don't just mean in the sense of saying the three Egyptian kingdoms were co-occurring, because that's obviously bad. What I mean is they will actually they'll flip events in history and pretend like they were never the other way.
What is wrong with creationism? To address that topic, I invited on to Amateur Hour Jackson Wheat. So, Jackson, thank you for coming on to the show. If you don't mind, just take a moment and introduce yourself. What you do, all that fun stuff.
So my name is Jackson Wheat, and I do a number of things on a daily basis. Relevant to YouTube, I run my own channel. It is just Jackson Wheat, where I discuss topics in evolutionary biology and zoology. I work with animals in the real world, and I am getting my degree in studying animals, so I can do that professionally in a slightly different capacity than what I'm doing currently. And so I'm just, in school right now, working on school, getting degrees, and doing the job. So
building a life, that's what you're doing.
Working on it, yeah.
Yeah. Now let's talk about your YouTube channel, because you have a ton of stuff on that channel. It's just you could never. I don't know how you do it for start. It's just video after video after video, and they're so in depth. You've clearly put a lot of time into it. So, how long ago did this channel start?
So the channel started in August of 2016. That I put out like 3 or 4 videos in 2016, something like that, and then I sort of got more into the rhythm of it from 2017 onward. But I won't give you the long spiel, but the short version is I met these what's the term for it? They're very national. I met like a nationalist in like a gold suit and a red sash while I was at LSU Baton Rouge, and I had a conversation with him about creationism and evolution. And by the end, he recommended I watch this video series, which was just going to destroy evolution. And I did. And actually, I did a few videos in which I debunked a few of them, and they were just so boring. I got tired of it after like I think 4. And there were, I think, 30 of them in the whole series. And so I was like, no, I'm done with that after about 4 of them. And so I branched out and started doing lots of other things. I went to just like, instead of debunking things, I'm just going to discuss a subject. We'll pick, this is what homology is. This is how genetics supports evolution. This is the evolution of tool usage in early modern humans. And that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So at first it was kind of like a reaction to creationism, but then it turned into more educational, like, building up instead of tearing down.
I wanted to be positive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not on the script here that I gave you, but I know you've done some debates.
Yes.
So it's just real quick, what are some of your favorite debate moments, or maybe debate opponents that you've sparred with in the last, I guess, 5 years almost?
Good Lord, it has been that long, hasn't it? That's well, I have different favorites for different reasons. If you want just straight up dumpster fire, you could watch my conversations with Nephilim Free. If you want, or Kent Hovind, or if you want a much more robust discussion rather than a debate, I would suggest my conversation with Faisal Rana. Or and this wasn't on my channel, this was on Invoking Theism's channel, when Dr. Dan Stern Cardinal and I talked to Invoking Theism and Cy Gart about the extended evolutionary synthesis. That one was not combative per se. It was, we were discussing, what are the merits of this idea, and Where do we think their weaknesses or pros and things like that. I debated Standing for Truth one time. I debated what was it, Smoky Saint. I've done a couple of debates where by the end, the person who was a creationist or an intelligent design advocate had said, "Well, I don't support my own position anymore. I think you're right about evolution." That's happened on two occasions.
Wow.
Both of which were with Dapper Dinosaur. So I think he is I strive to emulate his debate style. He's very calm. He's very, very good at talking to people, and he's very sincere. And so I think he definitely helped in those regards. I think one of my favorites was with Dr. Sygart, because I like not with Cy. That was a good one. I'm thinking Fuzzrana. I like Dr. Fuzzrana. I do also like Dr. Sygart. But my conversation with Dr. Rana I thought was very enlightening, and it wasn't combative. It was just chatting, the smooth conversation. So.
Yeah, that's what a debate should be. It should be a dialogue, So more often than not, when I watch a debate, it's always, I don't know. One side usually is just either more competent than the other, and then if you check the comment section or the chat bar on the side on YouTube, it's just a dumpster fire. It's just, oh boy,
so and so got destroyed.
Yeah. Oh,
he'll
awful.
never walk again after this debate. Yeah. Yeah, I've been a part of things like that. I mean, not those comments, but I've been in debates where that was the one side's going to destroy the other, and I never get re-invited to debates after I have them. I can't understand it. No one ever. I have one and then never again. Anyway,
so in addition to doing YouTube, you are also a published author with. So I got the book here. It's backwards on the screen. Yeah, it's with R.J. Downard. Now, so let me just tell you that the first thing I always do when I get a book, I obviously peruse the pages. I like to see how it looks. But I go immediately to the back of the book, and I check out the bibliography. Because a book is only as good as the footnotes or endnotes or bibliography. This book has 150 pages. I forget what it was. Of bibliography?
It's a ludicrous amount. And the type is small. Yes.
Yeah, it's not easy to see on the screen. But man alive, that is just so much research must have gone into this. And I know we've talked about it before, and you said that RJ had done quite a bit on his own. I guess he's been in the game for a while, though. But how much time from beginning to end did it take for this book to come out?
So that one took about a year.
Wow.
About a year and a half. I'll say that. It took about a year and a half. I proposed the idea. It proposed the idea to RJ that we should rebut the New Answers book 1, and then so we started doing that, and then I found out there was more than one. There are 4 of them.
Oh yeah,
there are 4 New Answers books, and then I was like, well, how about instead we amend that and we answer the chapters sort of by group. If it's a chapter about genetics, we'll just cover it in one of our chapters. Or if it's a bunch of chapters about paleontology, we'll just cover that all in one. And so that's what we ended up doing. And RJ was immediately, like, the second I said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" RJ was like, "Yes, let's get on it." So
yeah, so it's really handy as a reference guide, because the index is really good.
That was RJ. That's all RJ.
Yeah, building an index is hard, so kudos to him. That makes it really, really useful. And so when do we get volume 2? When's that coming out? I know you've been working on it, right?
Yes, we have been working on it. Your guess is as good as mine right now. We're working on it. I wrote several pages just the other day. It's going to be equally as extensive as Rocks 1. I can say that.
I believe it. I believe it. Um, well, so the reason I asked you on today is I wanted to get your thoughts and your insights on some of the major problems with creationism. Um, I grew up as a young Earth creationist, so I believe that the Earth was only about 6,000 years old, and that the Genesis narrative is a literal, 24-hour day. It actually happened the way it says it did. Evolution is a lie from the pits of hell. I went to a college where we were taught, my biology professor was a creationist. The astronomy professor was a creationist. So, I was immersed in it, and we had guys from Answers in Genesis come who were creationists.
Mm-hmm.
So, for much of my life, I was a firm believer in this view. And when I hit my 20s, of course, things began to change for me, and I abandoned creationism. That was before I became an atheist too. I was a Christian who believed in evolution. So,
Right.
But I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination, a biologist or have any real training in that. So my focus, as is the Bible. So you though have done so much extensive work on this. No, the guy behind you, Jackson. Could you move out of the way? That's I'd like to talk to him. You have done so much work on this that I thought you'd be just ideal for this particular topic. So I'd like to go through, I think it's 5 things that you've got that you see as kind of the overarching problems with it. So if you wouldn't mind, just go ahead and start with the first one, and we can kind of go from there.
All right. My one and only problem is it's wrong. Thank you for having me.
And record.
And so my first big issue, and this is one that RJ sort of bestowed on me when we first started chatting and hanging out. One which it took me a little bit to accept, but I am full-heartedly behind it now, and it is creationism or creation science, whatever you want to call it, as a field encompassing, the biology, the physics, the chemists, all the creationists, all the different sciences the creationists do, ignores or avoids upwards of 90% of the available relevant technical literature. So all creation science ignores about 90%. And RJ has been measuring this for, I think, 30 years. And so he's got the actual numbers on it. And at first I thought 90 sounds a little high.
Yeah, that's really high.
Really 90. And then as you delve into a particular subject, for me it's biology. I'm not good at physics. I'm not good at chemistry. I've had to take like a few classes in those. I'm survived. But if you look at biology and you look at just how much doesn't get reported on by creationists, it's vast swaths. We have entire fields within biology that creationists just don't talk about. My favorite one is biostratigraphy. So you may have heard of the old Kent Hovind canard, the rocks date the fossils and the fossils date the rocks. Wrong. They don't. Neither of those do. So the rocks can't date the fossils because a rock on its own does not tell you anything about the time about when it formed. Like you can't tell how old just sandstone is. You can't tell how old limestone is just by looking at it. Likewise, you can't tell when a fossil organism lived just by looking at it. But what biostratigraphy does is it takes particular fossil organisms that we can put within certain strata, and then we come in with radiometric dating and we say, okay, we only find this species in this 5 million year time slice. Nowhere else.
Like an index fossil.
Yes, exactly. Index fossil. That's what they are. And so we find this one species of trilobite here in this one little slice, and then we find the next species in this little slice right above it, and then so on and so forth. And so we correlate the strata. You can see that these species appear in this sequence, but that doesn't tell you how long that it took. The fossil doesn't tell you how long it was between each of these. It's the radiometric dating method, which tells you what the time was. Creationists just don't talk about index fossils. They just literally don't talk about them. If you look, the last time I checked, Creation Wiki's entry for index fossils is index fossils are considered a problem for the global flood. Period.
Oh.
That's it. That's the whole article. You get no discussion of phytoplankton like forams, diatoms, no pollen discussion, which is palynology, or conodonts, or where the trilobites fit. It doesn't make sense on a flood model or a young Earth creation model, because these things, if they're working as clocks, as they sort of are, then all the clocks should start at the same zero, but they don't. Mm-hmm. They start at different zeros. That doesn't make sense on a creation model.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Interesting. Let me ask you this. So Eric Hovind, I've watched a few videos, and he, in talking about the nature of the fossil record, posits this idea, which I think he's called it hydrologic sorting, to explain the reason the fossils are in the order that they are.
Yes.
Now, on the face of it, it seems pretty fallacious. I mean,
it's absolutely bogus. 110% bogus.
So explain that. I mean, what's wrong with that model?
Okay, so if I remember correctly, because this is again more physics and geology than what I'm used to, you should find the largest, the heaviest things on the bottom, right? And the lighter things should not disperse down as easily. They should be like suspended,
floating, and
floating, right? And so according to the flood model, and I'm using this term extremely loosely, the strata are laid down, right? And they're just bearing these things. So we shouldn't find, we shouldn't find particular species correlated with particular time zones.
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter if the Earth is actually 10,000 years old, why are we finding species correlating with certain rocks? That doesn't, with only this one stratum, no matter where you go on the Earth, it's only in that one. It's never above it, never below it. It's only in that one. That doesn't make any sense on hydrologic sorting, or the fact that the largest things in geologic history are in the middle. They're in the middle.
Dinosaurs.
They're above the trilobites, but they're below, elephants and horses and whales. Why?
Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, that's wow, yeah. See, I knew, just thinking through hydrologic sorting, it just obviously didn't work. I mean, but it's good to hear a more technical, more robust explanation as to why.
You would have to have sorting by species rather than by size, which is what we do see in the fossil record, rather than the sorting by size. So.
Or God did it. That's the other explanation. So we'll go with that one.
Just out there playing the trilobites.
That was nice of him. Now, before we move on to the second problem, when you say 90% of the available technical literature, do you mean so I'm thinking the literature available in a given time frame, or just collectively? If I pick up a creationist author today, he's not going to know the last 10 years of data, or is he what does that look like exactly?
Yes. Yeah, it is collectively.
Okay.
If you look at creationist literature today, they are picking these very specific points. So they're going to be but when I mean by technical literature, the peer-reviewed data, which is published in journals,
Nature,
Nature, Science, PNAS, all those. Well, creationists are going to cherry pick particular examples, and even within the papers they pick, they're not actually looking at all the data in them most of the time, and so they'll pick. There was one that was making big rounds or waves, whatever, a few years ago, with this idea that 90% of the species on Earth appeared within the last 100,000 years. Now, for one thing, that's not what the paper says. It makes actually the opposite claim, which is that they're at least 100,000 years old, not at max 100,000 years old. But also, the paper saying 100,000 years, not 10,000, not 6,000, 100,000. And so it's just numbers.
What's an order of magnitude, or 2 or 3 or 4 between friends, right?
Yeah, I think RJ and I made a joke along those lines with regard to a different paper. Yeah.
Oh man. Okay, let's move on to the second one. So what is the second kind of major problem that you have with creationism?
Okay, so this one sort of follows on the heels of the first one. It's not only do creationists ignore most of the data, but they trample all of the fields that they do dare to delve into. The foundational principles of not just biology, because of course evolution's a lie from Satan, but physics and chemistry have to be wrong for creation to be true. The speed of light has to be wrong, and therefore pretty much everything we know about the rest of the universe and about the other laws of physics are therefore wrong. It all has to be reworked. With regard to chemistry, radiometric decay is wrong. These things don't actually decay at these set rates,
consistent rates.
Yeah, it fluctuates, and which would irradiate the entire visual or observable universe. But that's what they claim. That's on their model. That's what it says. Or tectonic plates moving at rapid speed. It can't be true. It literally can't, based on what we know about physics. And it's not just in science; it's in history and even biblical scholarship. They trample those fields too, as I'm sure you know.
That's very true. Yeah, that's very, very true.
With regard to history, anything they claim, Answers in Genesis claims, for instance, that all 3 of the kingdoms of Egypt were co-occurring. That's the only way they can fit it into their short time span, is they were all at the same time.
Oh,
which I know. Right?
What Egyptologist in the world is endorse this?
Well, there are no Egyptologists who are creationists.
Exactly. So they wouldn't be Egyptologists.
Or what we know about ancient Sumerian history, Mesopotamian history, what we know about things like early anatomically modern humans, like I mentioned, the early modern human tool usage. That's all wrong on young Earth creation. And then biblical scholarship is they just disregard every interpretation which isn't their own, or they have these extremely bizarre interpretations of certain things.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
I'm sure you know all
Behemoth.
About that.
Yeah, Behemoth is a dinosaur in Job. Yeah, they have very, very odd views. Very strange views.
Yeah, they just trample everything. There's nothing that isn't destroyed by young Earth creationism.
So it's kind of it's just disrespectful of the work that people have put in. And it's kind of smug to put it mildly.
Yeah.
I was thinking about speed of light, and that I'm sure Russell Humphreys, who wrote Starlight in Time. He's big in creationist circles. But man, when I was younger, I latched on to some of his ideas, because it was a conundrum. How do we see light from billions of light years away, and yet the universe is only 6,000 years old? Well, this white hole theory that he proposed, it was just so appealing. It really worked for me. And then as I got older and thought about it more, I was like, ooh, maybe not. I'm not an expert in this, but people are saying no.
It makes like specific predictions that should be borne out if this is in fact the case. And I believe Tony Reed at How Creationism Taught Me Real Science did a video about it way back.
I'm
not familiar with that channel. How Creationism Taught Me Real Science is a fantastic channel. I love it.
Yeah, I'll have to put that in the description. If you don't mind sending that to me in a link, DM it to me or whatever later. That'd be great, because I'd like to put that in there. Let's see. I want to make sure we have time to get to everything, because this is so interesting. So let's. Do you have anything more to say on the second one, or are you ready to go to number 3?
Yeah, we can go to number 3. I think I've made my broad point on there.
Okay. Yeah. So number 3. What's the third problem that the heathen that is Jackson Wheat has with God's word.
We're being overly generous now. So this one is something that I came across sort of by accident, but I find very interesting, and it's a point that I think gets made a lot by like Aaron Ra, which is that at its core, creationism is a theological or has a theological imperative, and that's what it is. Creation science exists to prove the Bible, not to. It's not just a dispassionate, which, well, in fairness, no science is entirely dispassionate. But what I mean is, it's not just we're just searching for the truth. We're just looking for what it is. It's a series of increasingly ad hoc explanations for why things don't fit with the Bible. It's putting out fires. That's what it is. And so. For example, I can give two examples of this. So I have a book which was gifted to me, using that word loosely. It's the 1967 Watchtower book, Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation?
Oh, nice.
And so this book has it's really funny because a lot of the arguments it makes, like almost 100% of them, are verbatim what you would see from any modern creationist. And this was back in the 60s. So that tells you how little creationism changes. But one of the arguments struck me as very interesting because it's organisms or populations only degrade over time. There's never, the addition of information which helps them survive. Well, the interesting thing about that is we didn't have genetic sequencing back in the 60s. How would they know that? They didn't. But it gets even more interesting because today, Answers in Genesis and the Institute for Creation Research and Creation Ministries International all push an idea called genetic entropy, which is that organisms or populations are degrading over time. Their genome is becoming filled with junk and harmful mutations, and they're just degrading. And then eventually, God's going to come along and save us all anyways. Take away the saved and leave the rest here. And so there was this argument, this assertion before there was even data to suggest that could be known.
Yeah.
Observational studies didn't support it, obviously. They weren't seeing populations degrading, but also we couldn't look at genetics back in the 60s. Well, now we can, and they're still saying the same exact thing and using terrible arguments to support it.
Haven't moved on. They have not moved on with the science.
This has to be true because we have our interpretation of the Bible.
Yeah, they've begun with their conclusion that the Bible is literal and 100% accurate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Wow. Well, you got to love the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're nothing if tenacious. That's wrong about everything but tenacious. Wow.
My second point on that is rather brief. I just want to read the Answers in Genesis statement of faith, and I quote: "No apparent, perceived, or claimed evidence in any field of study, including science, history, and chronology, can be valid if it contradicts the clear teaching of Scripture obtained by historical grammatical interpretation. Of primary importance is the fact that evidence is always subject to interpretation by fallible people who do not possess all information." Close quote. Now, obviously, they're saying we are necessarily right, regardless of what the data is, because you're a fallible person. But what that also does at the same time is it invalidates anything that they say, because they don't possess all the information. So they invalidate their own arguments, their own interpretation of anything.
Yeah, that's... a few weeks ago, I talked to the non-alchemist about biblical inerrancy, and we talked about this kind of issue is they start with this assumption that because the Bible is inerrant, there's nothing that can come in that can overthrow that dogma.
And so
Mhm.
all the evidence has to be interpreted in light of that. And it's just so dishonest. It just reeks of not just dishonesty, but also desperation.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, so that's encouraging. Um, man, I gotta tell you something. I never liked Ken Ham. Never. When I was a creationist, I did not like him. I was an ICR guy, like all the way. Like Ken Ham was he was part of ICR, then he left into dancing, but I just could not stand Ken Ham.
And that's if you're ever interested, that schism was bizarre. It was
I never
bizarre.
did find out what happened with that.
I'm not gonna spin gossip on your channel, but it was. If you ever want to look it up and read about that schism, it's bizarre.
Yeah, now I have to. Thanks a lot. I'll be up late tonight looking that up. Say Ken Ham. Write this down.
Ken Ham didn't get the children
Poor
in
guy.
the divorce. Well, that's not entirely true. He now definitely runs the largest of the three, between like CMI, ICR, and AIG. He definitely runs the largest.
By far.
I guess
now.
In the end, yeah,
he got what he wanted
with both the Art Park and the Creation Museum. And I don't know if you saw it, but they're going to build a Tower of Babel now.
Is that real? Is that really happening?
Well, they have it on their schematic of like the whole park for the Ark. It's on there, that the picture that they had originally. The funny thing is, didn't God not like the Tower of Babel? Wasn't that like the whole reason for knocking it over and scattering the people?
The whole point was they built it and they shouldn't have. I mean, what are they?
Yeah.
What are they thinking? Like, I don't know. I mean, if they got the money, let them do it.
I mean, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah.
Okay, let's do number 4 of the problems with creationism. So last one was creationism has a theological imperative. And so what's this number 4?
So here's where we're getting into more what I consider downright nefariousness in creationism. There's a line, I think it's in, is it in 1984? I know I'm referencing 1984, how cliche. But it's, what is it? Control the past, you control the future.
Okay.
I think that's the line. What he means is that if you revise history, if you change what people learn about with regard to the past, you can change the people in the present, which influences voting policies and all that sort of stuff. And so you change how they will move forward as a society. Mm-hmm. And so creationism, and we'll get to more of that in point 5 when I get on my soapbox. But for now, we'll stick with the controlling the past part. So creationism has a very bad history of historical revisionism. And I don't just mean in the sense of saying the 3 Egyptian kingdoms were co-occurring, because that's obviously bad. What I mean is they'll flip events in history and pretend like they were never the other way. And the first example that I have here is, so when Darwin first published On the Origin of Species in 1859, the creationists were obviously opposed to both natural selection and speciation. Mm-hmm. There were, in fairness, a lot of people who were like, common ancestry is true, speciation happens, but we're not sure if natural selection is the reason it happens. And there was some neo-Lamarckism floating around in there. But the creationists were like, no natural selection, no speciation, get that out of here. And so, but today, you read any of the major creationist organizations, they not only say it happens, they require it is necessary because of booking the Ark. If you have this very interesting problem with the Ark, it's you only have so much space, and there are so many species on the planet. So if you can decrease the number of species on the Ark by going back and having them share more common ancestry. But that means that the rate of evolution has to be exponentially higher than anything we've ever observed.
Yeah, rapid post-flood speciation, I think is the term that John Woodmarap uses.
Yes, yeah. And we did a video way back talking about it. It's a version of evolution that's they're almost more Darwinian than any of the evolutionists.
It's punctuated equilibrium for creationists, is what it is.
Yeah, it's
Sudden.
ludicrous. It's like it's not just speciation. It's like they're separating whole genera, or sometimes even above that at the family level. That's like lions and your house cat share a common ancestor 4,000 years ago. It's bonkers.
Yeah.
But creationists now are like, oh no, speciation, natural selection. Actually, we came up with natural selection. And I cannot remember for the life of me who said that, but I was thinking about it earlier. That actually may have been Kent Hovind. It was like, oh, natural selection is not a problem. Actually, we came up with it. But it's like,
oh, well, naturally.
Yeah,
he'd be the one to say that.
Yeah, I do believe it was Kent Hovind. There were a couple that RJ and I discussed in The Rocks Were There at much greater length. One of them is, so Mike Riddle said, and I've actually talked to Mike Riddle. He came on for a chat one time, was that the Christian church predates the philosophy of materialism. And so that's not true. And materialism, well, so what he was doing was being like, everything was great. Christianity was in charge. We had everything covered. Then materialism came along, and now there are atheists everywhere. And this is the narrative. That's not true. There were atheists in recorded history back in ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
Materialism dates back to ancient Greece. Now, of course, it's not our modern version of materialism because we have a new understanding of physics and chemistry and things like that. But the philosophy itself way predates the Christian church. This idea that everything was gravy until the atheists came along and screwed it up is nonsense. It's totally fabricated. Oh, you're gonna love this one.
Oh God.
I know you'll appreciate this one. Nathaniel Jensen said in an article a couple years ago, creationists predicted that transitional fossils would exist.
I think I'm having a stroke. What was his evidence for this? Like,
okay, so he's going off of the because according to him, or because according to creationists, there's common ancestry at like the family level, whatever that means. RJ and I tear that idea apart. But because there's common ancestry at that point, we should have transitional fossils, transitional forms between like that common ancestor and our modern forms. Which, like, okay, that fair. But if you read Creationism written this year, there are still creationists saying no transitional fossils don't exist. That's ridiculous. It's hilarious.
And how would that even work? Like it takes all the fossils, according to Young Earth Creations, were laid down in the flood.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. You're right. It doesn't make any sense.
So how could there be any? Was there another flood? I'm so confused.
It does also depend on where the flood boundary is, because some creationists say the flood layer is at the KPG boundary. There's no evidence to back this up, but regardless. So they're like, if there are, transitional fossils in the Cenozoic, which is the most recent era or eon.
But why though? Why? I mean, wow, that is a bold claim.
Yes,
and frankly, stupid. I mean, I hesitate to use that word, but it is downright stupid. Wow, that is
because they're at the point now where it's virtually impossible unless you just deny, shake your head, plug your ears. You basically can't get rid of the fact that we have so many transitional fossils. Yes, you're right. They're desperate. And now, and so they're at the point where they can't just deny all these fossils anymore. Some try to, but in a weird way, the more honest of them will be like, yes, transitional fossils are real, but they're ours, which is amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I am regretting asking you to do this interview. This is just
And RJ and I lambasted that claim at length in Rocks because, of course, we have to. That's hilarious.
Oh, oh wow, that is insane. Wow, that's really something. That's to me. Wow, I have no words. That's just incredible to think that you could say that with a straight face. And I really want to know how it works. Like, how would that even work? Because if all the fossils are laid down in the flood, you wouldn't have any transitional species before the flood, right? Mm-hmm. It would be after the flood.
Yeah.
So then, how would the fossils?
Well, that's also part of the problem. Is you have a double bottleneck. You have the bottleneck of creation, and then the bottleneck of the flood. So we should expect in the genes of modern organisms 2 recent bottlenecks. What do we not find? Well, in most species, we don't find recent bottlenecks. The exact thing we should expect.
You want evidence, Jackson. I don't know why you expect that. That's just too much.
And then there's just one additional one that creation science predates evolutionary theory. And that was one also RJ and I discussed, but I can't remember who. But that was another one of those. Everything was fine until the atheist came along and screwed it up. Which creationism or interpreting Genesis literally was like not everyone did that. Some people had different ideas. Some were like, yeah, metaphorical. Some were literal.
Allegorical.
There were different ways.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, and so the idea that everyone interpreted Genesis literally until evolution came along is just wrong. It's just not.
Oh,
true.
Definitely. Yeah. No, they're. But what they do, in my experience, is creationists will set up this dichotomy between faithful exegetes and faithless exegetes. And so, if you are espousing a little creation, you're on the right side. If you're not, you're probably going to hell. You know. Right. It's just that kind of mentality. It's common among fundamentalists. Obviously, we see it all the time. But But wow, that's a bold claim. I think the author of Genesis probably thought the Earth wasn't super old. But he also thought the sun, moon, and stars were tiny points of light that didn't produce daylight, and that the moon had its own light. He just, the science is all messed up. But wow, okay,
it is amazing. Yes,
it's very worrying because some of the stuff you're telling me is not stuff I thought, but it's probably stuff when I was younger I didn't even think about. You know what I mean? Like, it just never entered into my mind. Some of the claims that are being made by some of these other creationists.
Well, in fairness, then the Jensen one was recent. That was just a couple years ago when he said that. And so, but even at the same time, it's not hard. Just go to Answers in Genesis and be like 2020 articles or 2021 and list after list of no transitional fossils. So it's like, Jensen, maybe work on your own camp before coming over to ours.
Yeah. Go on Twitter, go on Twitter and type in, there are numerous examples of transitional fossils, and you will have a host of people who are creationists saying there's no transitional fossils, so it's very common canard among creationists. That's incredible. Oh man. Wow. Okay. Let's go to number 5. If you're ready. And because you said this is your soapbox, I'd like to see what this soapbox is about.
Yeah, so hearkening back to that possibly Orwell quote, I feel like I'm going to be wrong on the source of it. I think that's where it came from, but I could be wrong. And then you're going to have a bunch of people yelling it.
Oh, the whole video will be worthless to them. He's invalidated himself.
Right. He got one
Jackson.
thing wrong, therefore he's been wrong about everything ever. Right. So hearkening back to that quote, control the past, you control the future. Where we talked about controlling the past, you literally rewrite history, and that controls the future, because if you feed people a narrative, then they are probably going to vote in accordance with that narrative. If it's the we have many mean, nasty immigrants pouring in, well, we're going to vote people in who are going to protect us from the immigrants. They're going to build walls and reinforce the border and whatnot. And so in a similar vein, because those are actually creationism and the anti-immigration camp often run in very similar tracks. But that aside, there are other issues which are affected more directly by fundamentalism, because anti-immigration not so much. Take for instance climate change. So at this point, I really don't get a lot anymore of the climate change is not happening. That narrative seems largely to have been abandoned, though of course there are still people who are pushing that. The Jim Inhofes of the world. I brought a snowball, therefore climate change is not real. But and so, or so I should say, the narrative more is now, well, yeah, climate change is happening. We all got it, but what's causing? Is it really us? Are humans really the cause, or is it the natural climate cycles which happen every couple hundred years? Well, for one thing, that's not really how climate cycles work. Climate cycles occur on the order of a few thousands of years, not the past couple hundred years, because both the so-called Little Ice Age and the
in the Middle Ages and all that,
and the medieval warming period, both of those were like just in Europe. It wasn't worldwide.
Well, to most white people, that's the whole world. So
all right, fair enough. I concede the point. but the Earth is here for it's our domain, right? What's the biblical quote?
Genesis chapter 1, where it's you have dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the air, and beasts of the field, and
exactly. And so whatever's happening to the Earth, it's fine. The Earth is ours. We own it, which is a terribly toxic way to think about the planet. Conversely, corporations are more like, we're gonna stack every government position with people we can pay to say, no, climate change isn't real. Just give them bags of money. But if you follow that mindset that we can't harm the Earth, then of course you're also going to vote for people who are handed big bags of money to say climate change isn't real. Another one, do LGBT people have rights? They're gay, Leviticus. And so they can't have rights. If nowhere in the Bible does it say bisexual people are on the hit list too. I just want to throw that out there. But loophole, right? But that's another one. Because these issues, this is not, as far as I'm aware, pretty much aside from the weird, more recent trans stuff, pretty much every secular person's like, gay people, lesbians, bi people, and then most secular people are also like, transgender people, whatever. Who cares? But again, if you're a fundamentalist, those are all no-nos. No, you straight, you have your wife, you have children.
That's how God created it from the beginning.
Exactly. Except Solomon, but we don't talk about him.
No,
we don't talk about that kind of biblical marriage. Can women get abortions? That's another that's a very interesting one. Because correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't the Bible talk about how to perform an abortion? Or it's a test for faithfulness, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the soda ritual. They take a potion basically, and she drinks it. And if she's an adulteress, her uterus basically drops out, which means if she was pregnant from the adultery, she would obviously,
right,
it'd be an abortion.
God would protect her, and
exactly. Yeah, it's a water. What do they call it? A water test. They used to do it in ancient cultures. Like it was common, and it was never practiced. So
right, exactly. And so but this is another issue that's like, you can't kill it. Baby's got a soul. The moment of conception, so it's a person, therefore women can't get abortions and no bodily autonomy. Or abstinence only versus sex education. That's in my neck of the woods. Wink. This is certainly a big issue in the South, because in the American South. Sorry, let me clarify. Because we have a lot of abstinence only sex education or sex education quotes in middle and high school. Abstinence only is not sex education. I'm sorry. Telling kids don't have sex
Exactly.
because it's coming from a place of, well, you got to get into a marriage and then you only have sex to, for procreation. Yeah. Have you ever met a teenager or a 20-year-old? Sorry. And so we end up in the southern United States with the highest rates of repeat teen pregnancies, and no surprise, we're also the place with the highest incidence of abstinence only sex education. Places that actually have sex education, I was going to say better sex education, they actually have it. They don't have nearly as bad rates as we do.
Yeah.
Big shock. If you make the contraceptives and things like that available, not necessarily free, but free's not so bad. If you make them cheaper or more available,
Exactly.
or part of the healthcare, then you also get fewer teen pregnancies and repeat teen pregnancies. And so
It's a
these are all
miracle.
issues.
Wow.
It is. It's a natural miracle. And so these are all issues that are informed by fundamentalism to varying degrees. We have dominion over the earth, sex only for procreation, and only within the bounds of marriage. Everyone has a soul, so not just no abortions, no euthanasia either, even if you agree to it and you're of sound mind. People having certain rights. These are all things that are informed by fundamentalism, and so that's my soapbox. We need to do away with creationism because it seeps into government and it makes the lives of a lot of people worse, and also the science is bad and the history is bad, so it's bad on all fronts, which is why we need to get rid of it.
You're telling me there's nothing redeeming about creationism? About
Zero.
fundamentalism?
I can't think of anything. Zero. Sorry, there's nothing.
No, I'm inclined to agree. I think that when you have that kind of mindset where nothing is able to, move you. The debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye, when somebody asked what would change your mind, and Bill said, show me a rabbit or whatever it was swimming up through the layers and in the wrong place in the fossil record. And what was Ken Ham's answer? Basically nothing.
There's a book.
Yeah.
He said, I'm a Christian, and it was his response. Yeah, it's absolutely right. It's they have the theological imperative, and everything else flows from that. When you have bad methods in one regard, you're going to have them in other regards. It's no surprise that so many, that like there are creationist flat earthers and the anti-vaxxers, and they all run in relatively. I mean, there are most creationists are not flat earthers, but the vast majority of flat earthers are young earth creationists.
Oh, certainly.
And
yeah, absolutely.
A lot of anti-vaxxers are also creationists. These are all the anthropogenic climate change deniers. Not all of them, but a lot of them are creationists. That's certainly a sizable portion. Creationism runs in a lot of these circles, and it's not for no reason.
And it's also why it's dying. It's this denial of reality is as people become more exposed to the evidence. And that was certainly true of me. As I became exposed to the evidence for evolution, it just made way more sense. And, I had to accommodate, instead of accommodating the science for the Bible, I had to accommodate the Bible. I had to figure, how can the Bible work in this paradigm that I know the evidence is overwhelming for? So I think that's why you're seeing so often young people are moving away from fundamentalism and moving toward a more either progressive Christianity or something non-religious, things like that. Did you, we may have talked about this before. Did you have a religious upbringing?
Yes. Not creationist by any means, but yeah, I was raised a Methodist.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you haven't had quite the experience.
No, I was never in a place where people were like reject the standard science or things like that. It was very
as one does.
relaxed.
Well, good. Well, do you have anything more to say on number 5 there? You got your little soapbox there. That was pretty intense.
Well, as someone who is one of those affected communities that I described previously, it's an important issue for me and for a lot of other people. And I think, and you're absolutely right. As since like the countercultural revolution and more, it's like it's okay to be gay, and these things come out, and now you have much more diversity in media, which actually an interesting study. It was like people who are more what was it? The people who are more, I guess you might say, liberal in their values tend to watch
tolerant,
shows.
inclusive,
tolerant, inclusive. They have a much more. They watch much more diverse shows, or shows with much more diverse casts.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought that was very interesting. And so now that you kind of can't not run into people who are gay, whether it's at school or in your work or whatever, and it's much harder when you know people personally, and then you go to church and church says you can't associate with these people because they are the enemy. And it's much harder to swallow that message, especially for young people. It really is, because they see that and they think, that's not okay. I'm friends with this person, or it's my cousin, or what have you. And so, it affects all of us. It literally affects all of us in this sense. So,
well, good. Well, I think that pretty much does it for our time. We've gone way over than what I wanted initially, but I wanted to hear your soapbox. I was so eager to hear, and I'm glad I did, because it's a really great point that fundamentalist ideas, which creationism is typically part of that, has real world consequences, not just this theology. It's not just staying inside its own box. It's affecting how we view very important issues. I think it was my wife, we were talking about the vaccination rates here in Louisiana for COVID, and how so many, right now it seems like it correlates with who you voted for in the election. And I just wonder why. I just think, the virus does not care who you voted for. It's indiscriminate. Just get the vaccine. But this ideology these people have is affecting the way they view reality, and reality does not give a flying fart. I mean, it just does not care. So that's spot on. Well, but before we close, do you have anything you want to plug, or anything you'd like to say to end our time together?
Well, I suppose check out RJ Downard and my book, The Rocks Were There. It's available on Amazon.
It's right there.
Yep. There it is.
It's a tome. There's my pen. There's the book. It's big book.
Yeah. It is. It's probably meant to be read more like an encyclopedia rather than just a straight.
Oh, yes. I completely agree with that. I'm glad you said that, because I completely agree. It's so thick. It's just, and there's just a lot of information.
Yeah. That was So it's, we aim to be a thorn in the side of creationists for years to come. And if you're interested in evolutionary biology, zoology, or listening to me for some reason, then you can check out my channel at Jackson Wheat, and I'm on Twitter also, so you can find me there.
Are you sure about that? You seem confused.
I'm on Twitter. Yes, I'm on there a lot. So
yeah, I'll make sure to put links to everything in the show description so that people can check all that out. Because I definitely want them to check out your videos, and the book in particular, I think would be very helpful for people to have. And there's a Kindle version, right, of this?
There is an e-version, yes.
Okay, just making sure. I couldn't remember. I like physical books, so
me
I gotta
too.
have it in my hands.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's not the same, just
it really isn't. And plus, if you get mad at somebody, it makes a really, really handy weapon.
Or if you have Darwin's doubt, it makes a good like doorstop, or like the table's a little wobbly, you just kind of.
That's true. That's true. That's true. I do use some books for that, mostly creationist. So yeah. No, that's not true. That's not true. I respect books too much for that.
Yeah, I value all of my books, even the bad ones, too much to use as a doorstop.
Well, Jackson, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. This is absolutely fascinating. Lots for me to digest, and I hope everyone who gets a chance to watch will be able to, get kind of a stomach ache, because there's just so much information that's come through, and a lot to consider, both theoretically and practically, in how we view the world. So thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
That was a fun conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. If you did, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button as well. Also, check out the video description, because there you're going to find links related to the topics talked about in this video. Not only the books, the articles that I had covered at the beginning, but also links to Jackson Wheat's YouTube channel, his Twitter account, as well as to the book, The Rocks Were There. And if you want to support my work, head over to amateurexegete.com and hit the support button, where you can donate via PayPal. Thanks for watching.